Welcome to the Burn Bootcamp podcast. I'm your host, Morgan Klein, co-founder and CEO, along with my husband and company visionary, Devin Klein.
And together, with our amazing team, we are going to help you push past your limits, not just physically in our gyms, but right here, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually on the Burn Bootcamp podcast.
Together, we will take on challenges and break through barriers to transform into the best possible version of ourselves. We are more than a gym. We are a community. Your community. Let's go, Burn Nation.
Okay, everybody, welcome to the Burn Bootcamp podcast. Today we have Dr. Kate Truitt. Welcome, Dr. Kate. Dr. Kate is a licensed clinical psychologist and a neuroscientist. You guys know how much of a nerds we are over here at Burn Bootcamp about learning about psychology and emotional intelligence and mental resilience and mental health to pair that with what we do in the gym every single day. And I'm excited to have Dr. Kate here because she is a practitioner. Okay, she's a practitioner and she resides actually in Los Angeles, California, where she leads her flagship group, her practice, her clinic, Dr. Kate Truitt and Associates. So a businesswoman as well, which adds a whole nother layer to it. Serves as a CEO for both the Amy Research Foundation, a nonprofit which is focused on advancing the role of brain science in psychotherapy. How cool is that? That is pretty cool. We're going to talk about all of her knowledge, all of her background. I'm sure she will weave it in here, her incredible education. But she's got all the letters. She's got all the P's and the H's and the D's. Loma Linda is where you went to school, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, yeah. And which is such a... Do they have a baseball team, by the way?
Lila Marymount, I believe, does.
You went there too.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
Loma Linda is one of the Green Zone schools.
Okay.
So Longevity, and they're a phenomenal medical school as well as internationally renowned school of public health. And so I did all the things.
Oh, great. Okay. I didn't know that. Okay, good. Well, thank you for being here today, Dr. Kate. Your background's fascinating. You're not only a clinical psychologist, but you're also an applied neuroscientist, and you have an MBA. Okay. And so it's like, okay, you're so smart. Thanks for sharing the time with us. It's quite a combination. Tell me a little bit about how you got into that. What drove you to psychology, neuroscience, healthcare administration, Loma Linda?
All the things.
Yeah,
all the things. Well, I, like everybody else, have a brain, and my brain has had its own trials and tribulations over the years. And growing up in especially the 80s and the 90s, I'm from the Midwest. I'm from Kansas originally. There was nothing known as mental health, really, or emotional intelligence. And so when I was struggling as a teenager, I didn't know how to help myself. And so when I got into college, I was like, this is so weird. My brain is really, really having a hard time. I had actually really severe social anxiety at the time. And so I started studying what was going on in this 3-pound ball of goo up here so I could better make sense of it. And I come from a long line of entrepreneurs, and so it just made sense as I fell in love more and more with the brain and psychology, to weave business in and see how we can make a change in the world. So I've worked in county mental health, I've worked at the Department of Defense, the VA. I've done a lot of different type of work in the field of psychology and mental health. And the idea fundamentally for me was, how do we break down barriers to access of care? How do we put health and wellness in people's hands? Because therapy is a privilege, and mental health is a human right. And so that's everything I do now is based on that.
So when you think about fitness, physical fitness, obviously, most of our listeners are members, right? They come from all over the world with our Burn On Demand product as well. And so we're kind of in the gym and outside of the gym. We kind of meet you where you are. And so how, people that are interested in bridging this gap between, the fitness and mental health, or how one and the same are those for you? Or how do you incorporate physical fitness into what you do? And what are your thoughts around mental health when it comes to training your body physically?
Huge. Well, our mind and our body is a closed loop system. So everything that our body experiences changes the way our brain is functioning and vice versa. So when we're looking at physical fitness, mental fitness, they are a combo platter. And the more that we can partner with our brain, and a lot of the work that we do here is called brain partnership, the better able we are to sculpt our experience of who we want to be in the world. And we do a lot of work with chronic pain and chronic illness, which plays a huge role in both the mind, body, psyche, and also in performance. And it's interesting because no matter what side of the spectrum we're looking at, when it comes to physical fitness, our brain is playing a really specific and important role in how we're able to show up, whether it be in hitting those next reps or even giving ourselves the permission to take a day of rest when we need to. All of that is very psychological.
We used to think, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I know the literature like loosely, but we used to think that we couldn't expand the size of the brain, that that like neurons were finite, and that once you lost them, there was no regeneration. And from everything that I can read and from my perspective, that has kind of since flipped, and now we're talking about physical fitness, mindfulness, these practices, these things where you're focused on kind of being present and doing hard things actually can build areas of your brain. I read a book by Dr. Wendy Suzuki called Happy Brain, Happy Life, I believe. And I'm not sure if you know that publication at all.
I haven't read that one.
But she basically is kind of like you. She did a self experiment. Sure, she had this kind of generational problem with memory loss in her family. And so she went out and said, how do I stave this off? And started doing experiments around physical fitness and it growing the size of the hippocampus in the brain, the area responsible for memory loss. So like how much of that is true versus just things I'm hearing in pass on social?
Yeah. Well, we're not necessarily quote unquote growing the brain. It's not like our brain is getting bigger. What we can do is change the way our brain is firing and wiring. So we have around 86 billion neurons and around 86 billion glial cells. So we've got a lot happening up here.
And those that doesn't shrink or it doesn't grow. 86 billion.
It can.
Okay.
I mean, it changes, but it's not in such a way that's substantial because we do have this thing called a skull.
Yeah, it can't. Yeah, so much room.
Yeah, if we don't want brain swelling, that's a bad thing.
Okay.
But we conceptualize the brain quite frequently as a muscle in terms of how we can shape the way different areas of our brain are showing up and performing in different spaces. And the one that you just mentioned there, the hippocampus, is a really important one for memory, storage, for helping synthesize our understanding of the world. And the hippocampus, interestingly, is one of the few places where there's a thing called neurogenesis, which is where our brain is creating new cells throughout the course of our life. And so when we're training our brain, that's a large part of what we're doing. In the realm of how we're guiding our experience of the world, if we have a lot of difficult, complex experiences or even traumatic experiences, those change the way our brain is functioning. And our hippocampus plays a key role in changing how we're showing up. But we can also help the brain change back or move into a stronger, more resilient version of itself.
So this is
three ways is the way I like to think about it. And
this is
neuroplasticity.
Neuroplasticity. Okay, okay. So neuroplasticity is the ability for the brain to forget old patterns and establish new patterns, right? Yeah. And we call those habits sometimes as like normal humans that don't understand science. Yeah. So like that's how we we stop doing things that are bad for us, and that tendency for our brain to want that pattern kind of shrinks away like a tree that you don't feed water to, right? Like it'll just shrivel up and it'll start to die and go away. Not immediately, but over time it will. And you can also plant new seeds, and then you have to water those seeds and nourish your seeds. Is fitness part of that? Is it like showing up? Okay, let's say you're talking to like a burn member. You're in California, right? Okay, yes. So our closest location to you is probably like Costa Mesa, California, maybe? Yeah. Okay. You're talking to a member from Costa Mesa, and you're like, hey, when you're showing up to go to burn every day and doing this really hard thing for 45 minutes, X is happening to your brain simultaneously. What is X?
What is X? Well, it starts actually with the act of making the intentional choice to show up. That's where the X starts, is the motivation, the dopamine, the engagement starts to happen, and the brain starts to go, I have agency and empowerment. I can do hard things. And it doesn't stay focused just to going to the class. It actually starts to change across a larger sphere of how we experience ourselves in the world. And so doing one hard thing for 45 minutes a day then expands into I can do hard things at many levels throughout the course of our life and succeed in them. I can push myself, and it trains the brain to know that those hard things also create successes. And one of the things that I love so much about fitness and these types of communities is the community piece. As humans, we're designed to be in connection and relationship with one another. And so that camaraderie enhances that experience of the world is bigger than I am, and when I'm having a hard time I can look around and have connection and support, which also creates psychological safety, which lowers stress. So it starts with the simple thought of I'm going to go, and then the brain starts to become wired just like our muscles do, and become stronger in the directions where we want it to be moving towards. And as you said, the parts of our system that maybe aren't working in favor of us, or that we want a little less of, because they're not being accessed as frequently. So, eating a gallon of ice cream every night because we're like, well, I went to the gym, I feel great, I did the thing. Then we're less likely to engage in those behaviors, and we get less reward for doing it.
So you're saying, in the sense that mental health is the act of keeping or breaking promises to yourself, and the more you can keep promises to yourself, the more likely you are to keep them in the future. And so it can be that spiral either way. And, I think, talk a little bit about what mental health is not, right? Because you have a lot of headlines, and let's be honest, like, we're all guilty at some point in time of being like a headline reader and just kind of like browsing the headlines, and and that like puts things, even if you don't think you're a headline reader, like you probably have some thoughts that, are manipulated or influenced by just different buzzwords or headlines or trends. Call it that even. It's not a good or a bad thing. It just is. So like when you're describing what mental health isn't, what would you say? What is the buzzword becoming?
Yeah. Well, I think it's even more important to down arrow a little bit more. So there's mental wellness is along the same lines of physical fitness or mental fitness. How are we curating with intention our best version of ourselves in the world? Mental health has, for me, a lot of gradients of rainbows and black and white and grays, because our brain can be quite counterintuitive at times. So what may feel like psychological safety for somebody who's survived trauma may actually not be in their best interest. So for example, somebody who's been harmed may choose to isolate because that feels safer than going out into the world and building new relationships. That isolation is a part of their mental health because their brain fundamentally thinks that that's how they're going to stay safe. And so when I'm working with my clients, everything we do is trauma-informed, neurobiologically based, and resilience-focused. And so our goal is to help the system strive towards mental wellness. And that's the whole mind-body system, which includes the physical fitness as well.
So the neuroplasticity that we're talking about, which it's just a fascinating fact and concept, and the idea is that the brain can rewire itself. And so from my like a neuroscience perspective, how can I think we're getting closer to this, but I want to zero into trauma and stress and how physical activity can play into that. Like we're starting to play around and tinker that. Like somebody that is psychologically feels psychologically unsafe to go into communities or to be a part of larger groups. How do we find it in ourselves to kind of rewire that brain and actually go do it for the first or second time, like knowing that it's going to be very uncomfortable. So just one of those things where you're like, yeah, screw it. You kind of have to just go once or twice. Or is there Or is there a more softer way to walk into it?
Yeah, there is a softer way to walk into it now that we're aware of, and because of the power of neuroplasticity and a lot of what we've learned through the field of neuroscience, especially in these last couple decades. So historically, there used to be that framework that you just described, Evan, of this exposure piece. You just got to go do it. And for people who are paralyzed in depression and anxiety and phobic behavior, really severe trauma, there is no just go do it, because the brain literally says, that's dangerous, I'm not going to do it. And there's no mind over matter when our brain is in a survival pattern. And that is really hard for a lot of us to wrap our heads around. If we're in it, but also for those who have never experienced this before, that level of survival paralysis. Luckily, because of neuroplasticity, and this is what my first book, Healing in Your Hands, is all about, we can create that brain partnership to change the way our brain is responding to the stimuli in our environment, so that we don't have to do that force push into something that's really hard or scary for our brain. And so there's a lot of different tools we can use now to help our brain see and experience the world as no longer being scary, so that we feel that safety or that comfort, or we can sculpt our brain neuroplastically to say, actually, I can go do that thing, and create new possibilities for how we show up in our world.
What are some of your favorite tools or your favorite tool from the book that you've helped people with? And maybe if you have an example that comes to mind. I always learn best by hearing stories.
Yeah, well, I'll give you a story that's very, very adept for your audience.
Okay, cool.
My favorite, one of my absolute favorite tools, and I have two, and they go hand in hand. The first one is what known as CPR for the amygdala. So it's creating personal resilience for the amygdala. For your audience that's not aware, the amygdala is this, we have two of them, little almond-shaped entities deep in our brain that really are focused on making sure we stay alive.
The lizard brain.
The lizard brain, yes. It plays a big part of the lizard brain. It also tied in the limbic system, our emotional brain. And when hard things happen, our amygdala remembers and has some of the earliest memory systems, but they're not classic memories, they're sensory memories. And our amygdala is 4 times faster than our thinking brain, which is why there's no mind over matter when we're in fear or survival mode.
That's interesting. Can I ask a question?
Of course.
So does that mean you since it's 4 times faster, that means humans are automatically emotional over logical?
Yeah, more or less.
Because you can't help, if it's 4 times faster, the prefrontal cortex is where all logic takes place, and you've got to almost, the energy has to almost pass the amygdala to get to this place. So it's something like that. It's at least the easy way to conceptualize it is it's 4 times faster. So you're inherently emotional over logical, which makes emotional intelligence that much more important.
Important, absolutely. And we can guide and sculpt our brain with neuroplasticity to have the relationship with all of the emotions that we want. So anxiety and excitement are very similar in terms of how they show up electrochemically, but the difference is how our prefrontal cortex is changing or reframing that electrochemical experience. And so CPR for the amygdala, as we call it, is when our amygdala is having a really hard time and is anxious or worried or stressed or even in a trauma response, is a very simple tool that utilizes brain games or cognitive distractions to displace the scary information that our brain's trying to chew on, or Google search, as I like to call it. And then we can also bring in mindful touch, or what we call psychosensory stimuli, like something known as butterfly taps, which is just gently tapping on one side of your arm and the other, or even rubbing your palms together or giving yourself a nice moving hug, fingertips on your shoulders, running your hands down your arms. This changes the electrochemical experience in your brain. So the combo of brain games plus engaging these little fibers in our skin, oddly enough, calms the amygdala down and makes it less likely to have a fear response to that type of stimuli in the future. And it's really profoundly powerful and very, very simple to do, because our amygdala, as you just said, is part of the lizard brain. It's old. It's very, very old. So it doesn't take a lot to help the amygdala feel better and calm
Yeah.
down.
Yeah. That is interesting because yeah, as simple as that part of the brain is, it's a very simple counteraction. You call your, hold on, let me think of, let's see if I can remember. You said trauma informed, neuroscience based,
Yeah.
and what was the last piece? Resilience,
Resilience. I was going to say,
care.
it's what you guys do. Resilience. Yeah.
Yeah, okay, so you have a name for that.
Yeah. It's neurotriad. So
The
we call it the
neurotriad.
neurotriad.
Okay, break this down for me a little bit more so we can understand how to use this tool.
Yeah. So the idea is always brain partnership. And so
Which you've said that a couple times. Just so we're clear, what does that actually mean?
it means being in an intentional relationship with our brain, just like we in fitness are seeking to be in an intentional relationship with the body. So you don't go to the gym and start doing crazy squats with 250 pounds. Well, I certainly wouldn't.
We do not want to do that. Yeah,
We do not want to do that.
we're gonna warm up.
Yeah, same thing with the brain. It's having a baseline understanding of how the brain is showing up for us and how it's been shaped through the course of our lives. And so, what has the brain learned about who or how we need to be in different situations?
So it's like that's different than like the self versus the ego. This is just like you as a thinking person understanding that what you think with is your brain, and that's an actual engine that can be fixed, manipulated. It's a tool, basically.
It's a tool.
Yeah, it could be taught.
Right,
Okay,
right.
that's a better way. Okay.
Yeah.
So it's just you as a personality knowing that you got this big thing,
Yeah.
this goo, and you can teach it.
Yeah. Just
Okay,
like
so-
knowing you've got biceps, and if you
Right,
want
and you
to
can train 'em.
strengthen your biceps, you can, yeah, exactly.
And so this opens the doorway for a lot of people to kind of start to believe that, hey, I can actually have some control over my life.
Yeah, because when we're looking at consider the dark side of mental health, so much of that is tied into helplessness, hopelessness, and feeling powerless, especially for those of us who've been through really intensely stressful or traumatic experiences where we don't feel like we can make change in our world. And the nice thing about our little friend, I call her Amy the amygdala, is, as you highlighted, she's involved in all of the emotions. And so we can help create different relationships with those emotions, which fundamentally have these really powerful effects on our autonomic nervous system, our somatosensory systems, and the way we're thinking about who we are in the world, which then means we can get out of bed and go to the gym. So back to the example of CPR for the amygdala, I had a client that I worked with a long time ago who had very severe body dysmorphia, which meant that he perceived his body as being very different or odd or wrong. And a huge part of what he wanted to do was get to the gym and build a new relationship with his body, not just through the psychological work that we were doing in session, but literally go to the gym. And he was terrified. And so he would go into the parking lot of the gym and do that CPR for the amygdala exercise that we just talked about, and walk as close as he could up to the door of the gym as his system and his brain would feel safe in going. This was more exposure therapy. And then stop and continue to play the brain games, apply the mindful touch, or do breath work exercises with the mindful touch until he could finally enter into the gym. And over the course of time, he started to rewire his brain to know that he can go into the gym and be okay. And now we're no longer working together, and he's doing bodybuilding.
Oh, nice.
It's slow, progressive steps, but creating psychological safety in his own neurobiology while doing the exposure led to a greater outcome of success.
Yeah, that is so interesting how that works. It's almost like the mind-body connection. We don't have to think about it. It's automatic, and it's just about the awareness of understanding how to, just as simple as, what do you call this? Havening?
Yeah. Mindful touch.
Mindful touch.
Yeah, just mindful touch, gentle, because we're all designed for touch. And when we apply mindful touch, whether it's like washing your hands under warm water, or this one's giving yourself a nice moving hug. It's these innate neurobiological mechanisms that we're born with are engaged and light up in our brain. And our brain goes, oh, I know touch. Touch has been a part of my life from the very beginning, because as infants, touch is huge. And there's an electrochemical cascade that then creates a sense of safety, or a quote unquote haven in the mind body system. And we have these internally inside of us. And those chemical changes include oxytocin, which are you familiar with oxytocin? It's a really important feel-good connection chemical. That plays a critical role in helping our brain change the way it's experiencing data in the moment. Plus, it also gives us serotonin, which is the kind of known as the antidepressant chemical. It does a lot more than that, but that's publicly what it's famous for. And releases something known as GABA, which is a calming neuromodulator, which calms down stress and anxiety.
So anybody can partake in that exercise if they're feeling even slightly anxious.
Yeah, and go on my YouTube channel and you'll find an entire playlist of CPR for the amygdala videos to learn more and practice. But yeah, any type of anxiety then it becomes a data point.
We'll put the YouTube. We'll put the link to your YouTube channel in the show notes, so everybody can go there and click right to it. Yeah.
Imagine a world where rather than anxiety feeling flooding or scary, we can go, oh, I'm feeling anxious. Let's give this energy a job.
Well, yeah, no, I can feel that in my own life. Like anxiety, you said it earlier, is so closely correlated to excitement or feeling enthusiastic, or panic too. Like on the other side, like it's so just like one deviation away from it on either side, and it is your perspective. There used to be times like back when I was an up and coming baseball player where my anxiety was like a young college player going against older guys. I was like very anxious about, like, I didn't think I belonged there, and then you start to have to, by just force of your environment, start to perform. So like you can't go out there thinking like that. You have to almost convince yourself that no, this is just excitement and this is a good thing. I should be amped about this. If I wasn't excited or a little bit anxious, that means I don't care. Of course I care. I'm like the best, I want to be, this is what I want to do for a living, right? And then you do that enough, and I feel like now anytime people say, hey, aren't you nervous about, going to speak or this thing or that thing? No, I'm so excited. I can't wait now. And I think I've just conditioned myself to take any uncomfortable, anxiety provoking moment and label it as excitement, at least, whether it's true or not, I don't know, but at least that's my perspective.
Yeah, well, and you've said that's neuroplasticity. So you've built those neural pathways now that say when we feel this chemical experience, it now means excitement. And so we have protocols to help people do that with great intentionality that utilize learning theory so that we can build upon it and help the brain, that's part of the brain partnership piece, quickly and efficiently curate the way we want to be in the world while healing the past. So any stressors from the past that might be getting in the way. To your point, we've worked with a lot of different individuals in performance sectors who have had, experiences where they get really injured or wounded, or feel like they have, quote unquote, failed in a big way. And so their anxiety becomes so overwhelming that they're paralyzed in their ability to perform in an arena that is deeply, deeply important to them.
Yeah, that is, I can see how that easily can go the other way if you don't work on it. A lot of our members are parents. Yeah. We're made for families. We have child watch at all of our gyms, and
great.
Yeah, it's. Have you ever been to a burn?
I haven't.
Okay, we got to get you into one. Okay,
Yeah.
I'll take responsibility. I've got to get more gyms up in the LA County, Orange County area. We're working on it.
Come on it.
I know we're working on it. But you talk a lot about childhood development and mental health. in the crossover. And so I think it was on IG. I saw you share something about how childhood neglect can really start to change the brain and impact hormones right away. And I was wondering if for our parents and for the parents in the community, if you could just speak on, what we can do to actively foster the resilience inside of our children and inside of our families for both, especially during like the tough times. I think it's pretty easy to feel good during the easy times, but during the tough times, how do we prepare, our kids for going through it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, we are the models for our children's nervous systems. So we are basically their nervous systems are being modeled by how our nervous system is showing up, which is where having that support for parents in your gyms at the Burn is so critical, because it creates that systematic safety in a community where parents are given the safety to go do their work, to take care of their mind-body system, and their children are exposed to that, which in of itself creates an enhanced level of resilience. As caregivers, and any adult in a way is a caregiver, because we are village designed. We are co-raising children, whether we know it or not, because we're also co-raising each other. And the more that we are prioritizing our mental health and psychological, physical well-being, the more resilient and stronger we are to weather those storms. Then we bring in a lot of play. One of the things that's really amazing about play is, while it can feel amplifying, and I'm sure you see this when you're doing your workout and your whatever it is, that energetic space of play creates connection. It gives us a lot of oxytocin, dopamine, it feels really good, and that in of itself inherently buffers stress. And so we can bring in games and tools that create autonomic nervous system regulation, that strengthen what's known as the window of tolerance in the family system, while enhancing connection and ultimately helps everybody's brains grow in the direction where we want them to go, which is really, 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 really fun.
So you're saying that by taking like mom and dad come in for Saturday mornings together, and they bring their children into Child Watch, they go out, they work out, that child is seeing them do hard things, they see them doing the work. We have little windows where at most of our locations where the kids can watch mom and dad work out, and you're saying just by them observing that and being able to make that connection, right, hearing it, seeing it, sensing the energy that they themselves are actually building, as long as mom and dad have that healthy relationship with fitness, and the kids are simultaneously mirroring that relationship neurologically, and they're basically conditioning their central nervous system to have that type of relationship with that environment just by being in it.
Yeah, well, exposure and modeling, absolutely. And there's a lot of data that highlights that families who go to the gym, families who literally play together. And so there's actually a great book that one of my dear friends and colleagues wrote called Play Together. Her name's Laura Haver. That is focused on how parents can integrate these types of lifestyle choices across the course of their lives. As families that play together have stronger resilience. Parents that have a focus on mental health, on physical fitness. It's not just specific to one area of their life. It's that generalizing effect.
Right. So, and then then you go from like speaking to and with families and children to places like the United Nations and the Department of Defense, and these bigger these bigger kind of professional government organizations, when you are presenting to these high pressure kind of intense environments. Yeah, people there have families, but you're not there for that, I'm assuming, right? You're there to help them become more resilient. Their resiliency is now the Defense Department's resiliency. I'm assuming that's kind of the lane that you take there. Correct me if I'm wrong, but what kind of how do you say, like what kind of play stress and trauma interplay do you teach those kind of serious people if you're not talking about children?
It's actually not that different, I think.
Yeah, that's right.
And I mean, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, but I think as adults, we get socialized out of curiosity and play. And when we're looking at leadership, the idea of leading through versus power over. So power over is I'm going to control people versus leading through is leading by design, by example. Servant leadership is another representation of that. When we can come together as humans doing human things, then we are all stronger and more resilient as an entity. And we're better leaders. And just like we're all in a way caregivers, we're all leaders, whether we're leading ourselves or other people in our world. We have the capacity to be. And a huge part of that is living in connection of, a shared laugh with somebody creates such deeper resonance
Right.
than a moment of criticism or a power over move of trying to control somebody.
I love how you say that. When in my mind that translates to like we need to be more playful. We need to have more fun. We need to be more like kids because we take our lives too seriously. And you wake up and another year's passed and you take life so seriously that you're then angry all the time, and then anger becomes part of your personality, and then you're angry for long enough it becomes part of your identity, and now all of a sudden
physiology.
Right, your physiology, it becomes like it becomes who you are. And so like I think we've just forgotten to be playful, to just have fun, to like crack jokes, to not take things. And I try to keep it super, super light. Like we work so hard around here, right? You don't go from, a handful of gyms in 2015 to over 400 by messing around and going slow, Yeah. And so we work hard. Yeah, we work hard, but it's also people are so willing to do it because we're having fun while we're doing it.
Exactly.
It's just it's like, and it is pretty cool what we get to do too every day. We get to work out in like the adult kind of jungle gym, like adult playground every day. So there's that component to it, which I'm aware of.
But you've
it's not
created it by design.
Right. Yeah. And I think part of the gym keeps us playful. And if we're going to keep growing the gyms, then we need to practice what we preach. And so, yeah, we're serious, but not so serious that like life is all about the problems and all about the issues that we're facing every day. We need to want to show up and actually have fun, celebrate each other, celebrate stupid stuff, right? It's not about 1,000 gyms, right? It's about the fact that on our fourth try, after failing 4 times, we finally made the first sale in that one product that we were trying to get at, or whatever. So that would be my take on it. In the corporate world it's not like the 1980s, 1990s power suit, power tie environment anymore. Young entrepreneurs like Morgan and myself, we incorporate real human emotion of the full spectrum into our leadership style. And when accountability and truth and honesty are at the foundation of that, right, it's very easy to be playful and be yourself and be honest on top of that, all of that. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And when we have accountability, safety, integrity, when the leaders have a clear vision of transparency, of real-time feedback, then there is the ability for people to have fun, to lean in with play while still being motivated, efficient, and effective.
You're right. And they won't do that if they don't feel like they can be themselves and be vulnerable around you. They won't play. Yeah. Like it'll be too reserved and too buttoned up, and I don't want to screw up because if I screw up, the classic walking on eggshells.
Exactly. And when I always think a lot about the power of music. And so whenever I'm working out, when I'm doing anything physical, or when I'm in a playful mood, I always have music on. Music is a great connector. It's an energizer. It's an engager. It's a motivator. It's also one of humanity's very primal forms of communication and storytelling, how we came together. And so looking at how do we bring in those more fundamental types of communication and connection into any environment, whether it be the Department of Defense, United Nations, or at the gym in a community. That moment of saying, high-fiving, or you see somebody else singing along to a song, and you're like, you like that song too? Immediate connection.
Yeah, for sure. We feel that in what we do as well. And clearly you've met me and know me a little bit based on our conversation. I'm not like your classic Morgan's not your classic, corporate CEO that
Yeah,
is,
same.
Right?
Yeah.
Either, and it's like one thing that allows us to do is really stay close to the product, and because the product is the differentiator in our opinion. And so then music then becomes this, it's like the trainer, the people, the community, and the music. Those three things. You could probably add the temperature in too as like a fourth, but those three things: the people, the trainers, the community, and the music. If you have all of that environment right, wow, that's how motivating is that? And so for us to lean into music, I'm interested to hear your thoughts on, just what I don't know how deep you go into like BPMs and how different types of music moves you in different ways, and the what's it called, the I think it's hertz. You can play music like healing meditation music and certain hertz that hits on certain frequencies, and then those frequencies are also like have a chemical form. I don't know, you might not go into like the chemistry side, but they also like sounds have a chemical form. Like crazy. It is truly like the foundation of all of like humanity in the way that we
Our brain is a symphony.
communicate. Yeah, it's
Our
wild.
brain is a symphony. And what you're just highlighting there also, Devin, is that when we have a lot of stress or trauma in our system, the symphony in our brain can get out of whack. And so I always joke, 'cause as a kiddo, I played the oboe, which is a very odd sounding wind instrument if you don't know how to play it really well. And so when I played it, I sounded like a dying duck. It was not pretty for anybody listening in. I was not good at it. And so when we have a lot of trauma or stress, it's like we've got dying duck oboe running the show in our brain, and the rest of the actual symphony or band isn't even able to be heard because this one part of the system is running the show. And that's where the opportunity for brain partnership of bringing in physical health, fitness, bringing in community and connection allows the brain to then start to normalize and come back to the healthy baseline so that we do have the symphony that we're looking for. And so that closed loop system of the mind and the body is critical. As if one part of the system isn't working that great, we can harness the opportunity of the other elements to create the resonance of where we want to be, which is really exciting and very important.
Yeah, no, and you're very clearly passionate about it, and it's super interesting, and I really am this whole mental, physical, plane. If there's three planes: physical, mental, and spiritual. This connection between the mental and the physical that we're living in the here and now is, and making people's physical lives healthy and happy is really important to me. And what you do, especially at like the Amy Research Foundation, which I'm assuming now that I know that you called the amygdala Amy, has something to do with that, or is that just a coincidence? Okay.
It's a both and. It's
Okay.
actually named after a young woman who's since passed on, who gave us our original endowment with the idea of taking the work that my team and I are doing. So I have the clinic here in Los Angeles, so we do neurofeedback. So we work with the hertz and everything you were just describing. We have a brain lab here in my clinic. And then we also have a global training institute where we run courses and educational programs to bring mental health into the community space, as well as for practitioners and psychologists and doctors and stuff like that. But the purpose of that foundation then is to do research on all of these different pieces and partner with other creators to have courses, who have systems, and show that what they're seeing actually pans out in the literature, in the research, through the data analysis. So we're actually just launching a new initiative where we're partnering with Apple Health. So we're building a app for all wearables, so we can even collect data on sleep and steps and nutrition and heart rate and all of those things as people are doing these different brain partnership programs.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah,
That's
and
really
show
cool.
that it all works. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really cool. Let me know how Burn Bootcamp can help at
Yeah,
any point
I
in
will.
time.
I'll
Yeah.
tap you on the shoulder for sure.
Yeah, no, well, I think one thing that's super interesting to me as we, I don't think it's any secret there's a real at scale, like we could serve the world better because we have so many members at scale who would be willing participants to show the connections between physical and mental health, and like our organization really cares about that. Like we're not just showing up for workouts, right? Yeah, you know, we have members that come in 5 days a week for 10 years now, right? And not just like hundreds, like thousands of them, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it's something that I know that we would always be really interested in, and that I want to continue to do. We have this floating floor, by the way, that it's like a gymnastics floor. It's 8 inches. It's got foam, like 2,000 foam blocks underneath it, 2 layers of plywood, and then a big gymnastics mat. And I would love to do a large scale, maybe this is outside your scope a little bit, but a large scale like impact study on joint health and longevity, because you're working out on this thing for, that's absorbing all your impact for 10, 20 years, whatever it might be. Anyways, but that's that whole, your whole world is, I think that in 20 years it will be normalized, and I think people like you and I could be the leaders of bringing the after the fact and before the fact together for people and saying, hey, let's get ahead of the down the line issues here.
Yeah, prevention.
Right. Let's get preventative.
Yeah.
And so maybe we'll do that at some point. What do you think?
I love it. Let's do it. That's the vision, is how do we, again, democratize mental health? Because therapy, I say this being a person who runs a clinic. I have an incredible team, and I recognize that it's a privilege to be able to go to psychotherapy, whether it be access to providers, safety, and there's still a lot of stigma out there, financial capacity, time. How do we democratize it? How do we make this as accessible as humanly possible for people, so that mental wellness, physical fitness, the combo platter becomes a part of daily life and not something that's special for some people?
Yeah, for sure. Because I think it has to be.
Yeah.
It has to. It's so hard. I come from a pretty impoverished background, and so I had been working on this my whole life, and it's very hard. I recognize deep wounds in people because I've had them, and so I can see them very easily in other people, and it's so hard to like get even when you go to therapy to keep going and to get out of it. It's just a very hard thing to do, right? It's like it takes a whole lifetime. So I appreciate the work you're doing, because it helps so many people that just they wouldn't know how to help themselves otherwise.
I'm right back at you.
Okay, so a little fun here at the end. Let's do a couple rapid fire things. If you could only teach one neuroscience fact to the entire world, what would it be?
That the amygdala is 4 times faster than the blink of an eye, or the thinking brain.
We're emotional creatures.
Yeah. And survival is priority.
So there's nothing we can do about being emotional people. We just are emotion. We are emotion. We are that.
We have feelings, and
feelings
are okay.
We got to lean into it. Okay.
Yes, lean in.
And use them for you, not against you, right?
Yes, partner with them.
Okay. Brain partnership.
Yep.
What's a daily habit that combines neuroscience and psychology to boost mental health outside of
all
touch?
That good stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. Any other ones?
Walking.
Walking. Just going.
Just get up, walk.
Just go.
The cerebellum, the movement of walking.
Just go.
Yeah, just go.
Stop sitting around on Instagram and TikTok being more anxious and just put it down and go.
Put it down and go.
Go into nature. What is it about nature that...
No, we're designed to be in nature. We're not designed to live in the world that we live in. I like to think about the idea that, we have hardware and software. So right now, there's a lot of hardware that is allowing us to be on Riverside that is software. And software is constantly getting updated. The hardware stays pretty much the same unless you go buy a new computer or whatnot, but there's still some basic facts of the computer. And so we can change our software, but our software fundamentally still has some pure gradients of nature being a good thing. We need oxygen.
Yep.
Sunlight is very important in terms of helping our body process different types of nutrients and have the nourishment that it needs.
And we all have, I know we're busy entrepreneurs and moms and parents, and we're go-getters here in around Burn. But you also have a cell phone. And so if you got to take a meeting and you got to go walk, go do it.
Do it.
Just get out there anyway, anyhow.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's see. One surprising thing about neuroscience and what it's revealed about you personally.
Oh, that's a good one. One surprise, there's so many surprising things all the time.
One that you're like, oh, that applies to me. That's me for sure.
Yeah. I think I have to go back to the mindful touch.
Okay.
That is just such a new piece of data that has been evolving, and a big part of what it highlighted for me was I used to be a nail biter and a hand wringer when I was really, really anxious.
Yes.
And when I started learning about the little fibers in our skin called C-tactile fibers, it made sense that I would engage in those behaviors, even though I hated the fact that I did it, because actually it was self-soothing. And then I was like, oh, good job, you. You were trying to do something. You just didn't know how to do it in a way that was really going to help you get to the end of the goal. And so then I started learning about it, the application of mindful touch, and studying it extensively. And I was like, oh, reduce shame and made me more proactive in my brain partnership and my self-care.
All right. I love it. Last one. Here we go. All right. What's one question that you wish people asked you more?
Oh, probably. Dang, these are not rapid fire questions.
I call it that. It's just fun and I like to
I love
ask
it. I love it.
challenging things at the end.
There's so many.
I got another way to phrase it. What's something you're studying right now that you like? I know this as an entrepreneur. There's things I'm working on that like are 2 years away from meaning really anything to anybody, but I'm so excited about it in the moment. Is there anything like that for you that you're studying that you're like, oh, this could be potentially really cool?
Yeah, there's a lot of new things in the world of neuroplasticity and how we can even more efficiently and effectively help the system shape itself, heal the past, create the present, build the future. And so while it's a kind of trendy hot button word right now, there is so much evolving and expanding in really exciting ways that it's going to be a total game changer. And we're at the leading edge of it, which is brilliant.
Yeah, we talk about AI a lot on this show and like all the different implications of it. And so I'm, the bioengineering potential is really exciting. So yeah, a lot of exciting things coming down the pipeline, it seems like, for you, Dr. Kate. Thank you for being here and sharing your time and energy with us today to talk about mental resilience and just your profession and your expertise. I know that I've learned quite a handful of things here in just we've had a little under an hour together. You've given us and me a lot to think about, and also packaged things up in ways. A lot of times these things are really complex, right? Like to understand, right? So like I appreciated your ability to make the complex simple by conceptualizing and giving us metaphors. If we were to go out and read, you have 2 books, correct?
Yes.
You have 2 books. Talk about them real quick. And if we could only read one, which one would you want us to read first?
Oh, well, they're very different books. They're kind of companion books.
Okay, go ahead.
My memoir came out earlier this year, but it's a scientific memoir, so to the point of going through a lot of really hard things. It's designed to use my life story as a case study for how the brain develops all these wackadoodle things that it does, how we get stuck in shame patterns, traumatic loss, PTSD, all of those experiences, and to make sense of them in a way that is loving and kind, the journey towards resilience. And so for anybody who's just really wanting to understand that they're not alone in the darkness, that's a really important, powerful book. And I've gotten a lot of wonderful feedback on it. My first book is basically a companion handbook or workbook to that. It's all about a
Got it.
formal program for brain partnership, how to use neuroplasticity to heal traumatic stress, to build resilience, to find oneself, especially in the hard moments, but more importantly, to build the brain that we want to live with in the world that we're navigating. So it just depends on where people are in their journey. Are they ready to build the brain, get healing in your hands? You want to better understand the self and the experience of self in the world first? Then start with Keep Breathing, which is the memoir.
Okay, I think Keep Breathing is going to be the one that I start with now that I've got a little intro to you, and my team and I did hours of research, and I was trying to read the book, at least one of them, before we got on today, but I didn't have the time, so I'm going to get it. And my team always listens to these, and they do buy the books, and I get them and I read them because and I'm really excited to now that I have a face to the name, go out and try one myself. I think Keep Breathing will be the first one I try. Well, you're on LinkedIn, Dr. Kate Truitt, truittinstitute.com, YouTube. Like we mentioned, we'll link your YouTube channel, which is at Dr. Kate Truitt, Instagram, Dr. Kate Truitt, and listen, get your books on Amazon and support. Thank you so much for being here, Dr. Kate, and sharing with Burn Nation how to be more mentally resilient and how to connect our physical body with more intention to our mental health. We appreciate you.
And thank you for everything that you do and the physical fitness, mental fitness, and the care you bring to all of your members.
Well, thanks. We'll keep it going. Maybe we'll do maybe we'll do a paper down the road or something. That'd be fun.
Let's do it.
All right, Burn Nation. Dr. Kate Truitt. 2 claps on 2. 1, 2.